Hello and welcome. This is Deep Dive and I'm Tiffany Meier. Let's talk about big tech and what role it could be playing in the U.S. election. Now, some of you mentioned Trump's executive orders. I'll touch on that later in the episode. But first, big tech. Lots of news there. Let's delve in. Some updates. The Amistad Project had a hearing on Wednesday today, delving into election funding from Facebook. The group alleges that hundreds of millions of dollars were injected into the election, with $500 million coming from Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg. They add this was done in violation of state election laws and resulted in an unequal distribution of funding, which they say resulted in depriving voters of both due process and equal protection. The director of Amistad Project and former Kansas Attorney General Phil Klein said at the hearing,
"The report we are releasing today, entitled The Legitimacy and Effect of Private Funding in Federal and State Election Processes, was commissioned by the Amistad Project of the Thomas More Society. The report details the flow of more than $500 million, more than the federal government expended in the CARES Act to fund the election during the COVID crisis, by over $100 million more than the federal appropriation. This effectively is a shadow government running our elections. $500 million into the hands of state and local officials who, in turn, allowed those private organizations and private interests to have access to sensitive and private information of American citizens that was of value to political parties and monetized for interests on the left. It also reveals how private parties, by dangling the dollar bill, incentivize local election officials to violate state law. The Michigan Attorney General threatened legislators with whom she disagreed with criminal prosecution. She tweeted it out and gave an interview that those legislators who might not agree with certifying the election could be investigated criminally by the chief law enforcement officer of the state of Michigan. Folks, that's totalitarianism. That is thuggery. It is stunning that America hasn't risen up with a uniform voice and state that when the state threatens people who are elected to be the voice of the people with criminal prosecution if they speak on the people's behalf, should be arrested. That's not the United States of America. Michigan is under siege.
The Amistad hearing also touched on election integrity in key states.
This is the report prepared by Stillwater. And it shows the flow of private monies on the top tier from leftist organizations through 8 private 501c3s, as well as 2 quasi-public private entities, demonstrating how they became the shadow government that managed the elections in the urban core. It was Mr. Zuckerberg and his money, the Democracy Fund, the Tides Foundation and the 1630 Fund, Arabella Investors and the New Venture Fund, Skoll Foundation, Mr. Zuckerberg and his wife Priscilla Chan and the Knight Foundation that we've discovered thus far that flowed these monies in for this purpose. These monies dictated everything from how to run the election to actually designing the ballot, designing the software for the poll books, encryption services for government. There's been a lot of discussion of hacking into our system. We were not hacked from without. We were hacked from within.
And big tech and the courts are facing off again. Europe just rolled out 2 new regulations for big tech. The first is the Digital Markets Act, which targets companies with a wide reach. How wide of a reach? Well, 45+ million monthly users or 10,000+ business customers. The act calls such companies gatekeepers, and they have to live up to their name. Under this act, these gatekeepers must disclose planned takeovers. They can't play favorite to their own products on their platforms, and they have to have limits on the data they collect. Any rule breaking would result in a 10% fine of annual global revenue. The second is called the Digital Service Act. Its goal is to rein in big tech and hold them accountable for illegal content. Any transgressions would result in a 6% fine of annual revenue. These still need to be ratified or made official, which could take some time. But if they become law, they'll be some of the strictest out there. Meanwhile, here in the U.S., big tech is also facing rising scrutiny. The Federal Trade Commission, or FTC, ordered the top tech companies to disclose their user data practices. The ones named are the top 9. They are Amazon, TikTok, namely the owner ByteDance, Discord, Facebook and its subsidiary WhatsApp, Reddit, Snap, Twitter, and YouTube, which is owned by Google. The companies have 45 days to respond. President Trump said earlier this month he would veto a major annual defense bill unless Congress repeals a federal law protecting internet companies like Facebook and Google. Otherwise known as Section 230, that law protects the tech giants from being held liable for user-posted content. The sweeping $740 million NDAA bill decides the annual policy and budget on the Department of Defense, and it has been passed every year since 1961. Earlier this year, the Democrat-led House and Republican-controlled Senate passed different versions of the bill. The National Defense Authorization Act, or NDAA, addresses pay increases for U.S. troops, aircraft and ship purchases, as well as how to deal with rivals like China and Russia. Lawmakers unveiled their final version a few days after Trump's note. This year's bill would prevent Trump from slashing the number of active duty troops in Germany and Afghanistan below a certain level. It would also contradict Trump's wishes to keep the names of Confederate generals on U.S. military bases. It also did not include the provision Trump wanted on big tech, which could set up a veto fight for Trump. So why is President Trump so adamant about big tech? Trump accuses Facebook and Twitter and other top tech companies of stifling conservative voices. Are these concerns unfounded? Some say so, but there are alarming reports surfacing. Throughout this election process, there's been fact-checking labels popping up all over social media. Why should this be concerning? Well, Facebook, for example, claims its army of fact-checkers are independent. But where is the money coming from? One such fact-checker, Lead Stories, is partly paid through a partnership with TikTok, the social media platform run by a Chinese company that owes its allegiance to the Chinese Communist Party. TikTok currently is being probed by U.S. officials as a national security threat. Moreover, the organization that's supposed to oversee the quality of fact-checkers is run by Pointer Institute, another TikTok partner. Lead Story says it's been contracted by ByteDance for fact-checking related work, referring to TikTok's announcement earlier this year that it has partnered with several organizations, quote, to further aid our efforts to reduce the spread of misinformation, particularly regarding the CCP virus pandemic, which originated in China and was exacerbated by the CCP regime's cover-up. Lead Stories was started in 2015 by Belgium website developer Martin Schenk, CNN veteran Alan Duke, and 2 lawyers from Florida and Colorado. It listed operating expenses of less than $50,000 in 2017, but had expanded 7-fold by 2019, largely because of the more than $460,000 Facebook paid it for fact-checking services in 2018 and 2019. The company took on more than a dozen staffers, about half of them CNN alumni, and became one of Facebook's most prolific fact-checkers of U.S. content. This year, the funding sources included Google, Facebook, ByteDance, and several online advertising services. The group said advertising brought it less than $25,000 last year. The bulk of the funding still comes from Facebook. And a BuzzFeed investigative report delved into Facebook's ad juggernaut and the detrimental effect it's having on its users. Analysts have projected Facebook's ads are set to bring in a whopping $80 billion this year. But at what cost? The BuzzFeed investigation uses current and former employees who says the tech giant does that by joining up with, quote, scammers, hackers, and disinformation peddlers who use its platforms to rip off and manipulate people around the world. These employees told BuzzFeed banks benefit while people suffer. And Google just lifted its political ad bans on December 10th last week. This comes around a month before the Georgia Senate runoff races. Those are crucial as the results determine who controls the Senate. Will it remain Republican or will it flip Democrat? It seems all eyes will soon be on Georgia, the Peach State. And some people have been questioning why President Trump hasn't implemented his 2018 executive order on election fraud. But that order deals with foreign interference. White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany told reporters Tuesday that she is not aware of any report issued by the Director of National Intelligence, John Ratcliffe's office, about foreign interference. According to the 2018 order that Trump signed, quote, not later than 45 days after the conclusion of a United States election, the Director of National Intelligence, in consultation with the heads of any other appropriate executive departments and agencies, shall conduct an assessment of any information indicating that a foreign government or any person acting as an agent of or on behalf of a foreign government has acted with the intent or purpose of interfering in that election. The order also allows for the imposition of any recommended sanctions against former entities or others that are believed to have interfered in the election. But since it was signed, there has been little mention of it until recently. Sidney Powell, who filed election-related lawsuits in favor of Trump, told the Epoch Times earlier this week that Trump could use the order. She explained that it could give Trump, quote, all kinds of power to do everything from seize assets to freeze things, demand the impoundment of the machines, referring to voting machines. Now, despite that, President Trump has already taken steps in that direction. He fired National Defense Secretary Mark Esper. The new Defense Secretary, Chris Miller, has already triggered a 2017 National Defense Authorization Act, where special operations report directly to him. But this is also activating a national security memo that was implemented under President Kennedy in the 60s, 1961 to be exact, which has since been dormant. Acting Under Secretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security Ezra Cohen-Watnick noted that JFK predicted the need for special ops, which are particularly suited to unconventional warfare. He said, quote, the global demands for special operations forces then and now has confirmed President Kennedy's foresight. And now under the leadership of President Trump, we are fully realizing President Kennedy's prescient view of special operating forces. Known as Memorandum 57, the order bypasses the CIA and gives the special ops directly to the Secretary of Defense, turning them into a military function. So how are all the cards going to play? It seems only time will tell. Let me know what you think below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for tuning in to Deep Dive. I'm Tiffany Meier, and see you soon.